And welcome back, rugby fans, to Rugby411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata. And wow, has it been an exciting week here in Major League Rugby. Our first of Storm. I promise that will be the last time that I'll be using that graphic today because it's a lot. It's a lot. It's everything we've been doing for the next month or a half is going to be an overload of Major League Rugby goodness. It's still great to have all this Major League Rugby action, but it's going to be a lot. And Storm Week has proven so far in the first week of Storm Week that we are definitely dealing with a lot of things. Interesting because not a lot of movement per se over the course of technically a week and a half of rugby action. It's going to be kind of new territory for me here at Rugby411, and I'm trying to figure out a way to kind of deal with it, especially with the power ranking. So what I've decided to do is we kind of are going to do this in two phases. We'll have the first phase, which is pretty much all the weekend games, and then again, we had a Tuesday game and a Wednesday game, so that will be kind of part two. Fortunately, part two phase wasn't really too much. A little spoiler, not too much really happened in regards to movement in the power rankings. So, but there's been a lot going on and some interesting developments. Of course, is reflected in our SuperBru pick'em pool. But let's go into our power rankings again. If you've never watched my power rankings before, this is all about what you do on the pitch, who you beat, where you beat them, how you beat them too, and that's kind of going to be a running theme in this week's slate of our power rankings, especially in phase one, because the way that some of these teams were playing, and again, lots of factors are going to go into this, especially because of Storm Week. Some teams aren't going to be at 100%. You can kind of see with the rosters how they were. Not a lot of the stars were there for certain games, and some games you'll see the stars kind of come out. So, you kind of have to see how the game is played. And that's why I always tell you guys, I watch every game of the season because you really can't just tell by the scoreboard how well a team has done. There's a lot to be said with what is actually going on the pitch in the game, and that really does determine the outcome of these power rankings. So, without that, any further say, let's start with obviously team number 11. Still on the bottom, Anthem Rugby Carolina. Unfortunately, still searching for their very first win of the season. They had a tough first Storm Week, 2 games. Both games, one of them a real big thumping. But Anthem not only, I think, have been trying to deal with roster management, but they have a lot of injuries. They are limping along so far in the second half of the season. They fall short in this game with New England, 26-6. Kind of a close game. Actually, I think this score is a little bit more reflective on New England than on Anthem, because it was actually a pretty competitive game going into the second half. I won't go too much into the New England side until we get to New England, but New England, of course, scored a couple of tries. As we get into the second half, like I said, Anthem kind of stayed in it into the second half of the game. But by the second half, New England kind of pulled away, especially with a couple of tries by Paula Balakana. Yeah, Anthem just didn't really have much to say to New England, but New England, I felt, really didn't dominate in this game. Again, I don't think New England necessarily had a full slate of players as well, which will then be reflected in the next game that they played in Storm Week. But let's move on to the next one. Technically on a bye, kind of, is RFCLA at number 10. They don't play until the until the Tuesday game. So this right now they're kind of in a bye until we get to phase 2. So then move on to the next team who unfortunately has really skidded down. San Diego Legion once was the hottest team in the league, slides down further from number 7 to, I believe, the lowest position they've been in the power ranking this year, down to number 9, unfortunately falling short to a very hot Utah Warriors team, 18-31. Again, I don't know what's going on with San Diego. San Diego started off the season hot, undefeated, the last team to be undefeated, and this is now their fourth straight loss tacked on. They started 5-0. They're now, with the loss to Utah, 5-4. And it's just not going to get any easier with the way that their schedules turned out. But let's go into the game. San Diego starts off with a yellow card, which of course Utah then capitalizes on. Lincoln McClutchy, though, has been pretty much always there for San Diego. He scores a try to get the game within 4. In the second half, San Diego then unfortunately gets their second yellow card. Utah capitalizes on that with a couple of tries. San Diego also was really inflicted with a lot of handling penalties and just a lot of miscues. A couple of times they could have maybe scored, but Utah just pretty much put the game away in the second half. And it just really looked like San Diego was just really flat-footed in this game. And I don't know what's going on with them or how they're going to turn around, but they have the Cali Cup coming up against LA, and then they have to go back to play against Utah in Utah. So they have 2 games in a row where they're going to be away from their home pitch. Like I said, it's not going to get easier for San Diego. I can see San Diego losing the next 2 games and end up being 5-6 when they started 5-0. So it's San Diego's got to figure out what's going on and why they've been falling so drastically. Again, looking at their squad, it doesn't look like they have a lot of injuries comparatively to other teams. So I am just puzzled by what is going on with the San Diego Legion. Another team that lost, but I didn't feel the way that they lost reflected too much in their movement. So that's why I kept them at number 8. Old Glory DC, who loses to Miami 35-37. So it was a very close game. Old Glory actually had a couple of chances to win in this game. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, just kind of came short. In the game, Miami started with a yellow card, which allowed Old Glory to score. In the game, Old Glory is up because of a couple of more tries. Miami is able to keep ahead, though. So the score is 31-14 at the half. In the second half, Old Glory is able to get within 10 with another try. A penalty kick from Jason Ewok Emery, who I have to shout out. He had his 50th MLR cap, so congratulations to former RFCLA player Jason Ewok Emery. A great guy on and off the pitch. Congrats on the 50th cap. Unfortunately, his penalty kick doesn't really help too much. Old Glory does commit quite a few penalties on their own, which allows Shane O'Leary, Miami's penalty kicker, fly half to kick a couple penalty goals, and that kind of made the difference in the end to make the game 37-35. Old Glory was able to get a try at the very last second to get within 2, but that was pretty much as far as they went. So again, Jason Emery did very well. 5 for 5 off of the tee for 10 points. But again, a lot of handling errors by Old Glory. They came within 2, so I didn't penalize them too much comparatively to how San Diego lost. And that's why I had San Diego slide past Old Glory. Plus, this game was at Miami, so, on the road, losing only by 2. Granted, Miami isn't the greatest team in the world. No offense to Miami. But I felt Old Glory should stick to number 8. At number 7, a team that is kind of maybe finding their mojo, moving up 2 spots from number 9, is the Seattle Seawolves with the kind of impressive, maybe upset win over a very game Chicago. Now, granted, they won 28-22, and really it felt like Chicago had a couple of chances to win the game, and for whatever reason, kind of got in their own way. So I let Seattle move up a couple of spots, even though Chicago is a pretty high-ranked team. At the time, they were ranked number 2. But I didn't feel that Seattle was as dominant in this performance. This was at home in Starfire Stadium. So I didn't give Chicago too much problems with this loss. Rodney Iona, who has been struggling quite a bit this season, actually was very, very impressive in this game. Starts off the game with a 50-meter penalty kick at the halfway line of the pitch. Very impressive. Inofuri got an interception very early on, which developed into a try for Devon Rousseau, who's been having a phenomenal season for Seattle. Seattle leads early 8 points. After Chicago is able to tie the game 8-8, Seattle then scores with Rickard Hadding, who got his 46, and then later on his 47th try in the game. It makes them second overall in Major League Rugby history with tries. Game is 15-8 at the half. A try by Inufuri, though, a great try by Inufuri, allows Seattle to get within 6 in the last 3 minutes. Chicago was able to get the ball, but for whatever reason, after after Seattle gets up by 6, 28-22, Chicago got the ball at the very last minute, had the opportunity to kick to touch in order to get a line out. For whatever reason, the Chicago player missed the touch zone. Went into the hands of a Seattle player. That Seattle player was able to kick the ball out of bounds at the end of the game, causing the game to end. So again, Chicago had a good chance of winning this game, but unfortunately just a mental mistake by the guy who kicked the ball to a Seattle player instead of kicking it out of bounds allowed Seattle to secure the win 28-22. So again, kind of was more on this game, more on Chicago looking kind of flat and not necessarily Seattle. Though Seattle kind of does turn around in a couple of days later in their second game of the Storm Week, but we'll go into that in phase 2 when we talk about the power rankings. I do also have to give a shout out to JP Smith, who was the second MLR player to celebrate their 100th cap. Of course, the very first player to do that was Dylan the Butcher Fawcett. The only difference is JP Smith has had all 100 caps with the same team, the Seattle Seawolves. So congratulations, JP Smith, especially with, free agency in Major League Rugby isn't as a prevalent thing as it is in, say, National Football League or in Major League Baseball. But it is a thing, so to be with one team for 100 caps is really, really impressive. So I don't know if that will ever be broken or matched, but at least JP Smith has set a solid standard with 100 caps and more with the same team, and that's quite an accomplishment. So moving on, as we mentioned before, Houston is able to defeat NOLA at number 6, 17-15. Now, again, this is another game, even though Houston was able to defeat a team that was higher ranked at the time, NOLA was number 3. It was kind of a weird game, very, very sloppy, as the score kind of shows you, 17-15, not a very high scoring game. This was kind of an upset game as well, because NOLA, I don't feel NOLA was a favorite in this one. Houston has been pretty dominant up to this point. But for whatever reason, both teams looked very, very flat in this game. At the very beginning of the game, both teams trade tries. It has to be mentioned that Max Schumacher got his first start for the Houston SaberCats in place of AJ Alotimu, who has been really, really struggling this season. In the end, unfortunately, there were a lot of injuries in this game. Andre Warner got knocked out with, unfortunately, a tackle by a teammate because the teammate fell and ran into Andre Warner's knee, so Andre Warner went out. There was Isaac Solomon, a NOLA player that looked like he dislocated his shoulder. So this is going to be something that teams are going to be really, really wary of. It's just injuries during this brutal, brutal Storm Week, Storm Month. And as you see, especially in this game, there were a lot of injuries. So hopefully players are okay. Further on in the game, in the second half, Houston starts to take advantage of a lot of NOLA mistakes. They scored 2 tries to take the lead at 17-12. And then NOLA was able to get a penalty kick from Luke Carty to get within 2. And then, for whatever reason, NOLA had a couple of chances to win the game. And even though they had possession of the ball and time was running out, for whatever reason, the NOLA players were kicking the ball away to give it to Houston, which is a very odd strategy to give because time is running out. If Houston has the ball, by the time runs out, Houston can just kick the ball out of the game and end the game, and NOLA loses. So don't know why the strategy was for NOLA to be kicking the ball, especially at the end of the game when they're down 2 points. This was definitely a game that NOLA could have won. Maybe should have won. So that's why I don't move Houston up very much for the win. I don't move Houston at all. And I only slid NOLA down just a little bit because it wasn't that impressive of a victory in my opinion. Number 5, Miami, who also didn't look very impressive in their win against DC, does beat DC as I mentioned before, 37-35. Again, kind of an odd game, that one. Miami didn't look very hot. Oh, Glory also didn't look very good as well. I do have to make a shout out, though, to Shane O'Leary, Miami's new fly half, coming in to replace Martin Elias, even though Elias has returned. But man, Shane O'Leary has been just clutch for Miami. In this game, 15 points off of the tee, 6 for 6. That definitely made a difference in this game because, again, Miami only won by 2. So Shane O'Leary has really been a star for the Miami Sharks and maybe might be the turnaround for Miami that they've been looking for. They started the season hot, then kind of fell down, now slowly making their way back up. At the number 4 spot, dropping down a spot to number 4 from number 3. Nola Gold, like I mentioned before, losing just barely to Houston, 15-17. I do have to mention that in that game for Nola, Ed Fado got a try, and he's been looking very phenomenal this season. So did Ruben De Haas as well. Nola has been struggling, but they've been getting wins when they need to. So I feel like they could make the playoffs if they're able to beat off Miami and Old Glory to get into it. I think that last playoff spot is going to really come down to those 3 teams. Unfortunately, I believe Anthem is pretty much out of it. We'll talk a little bit more about Anthem as we talk about their second game that they did play within 4 days of time, which is ridiculous. Number 3, Chicago losing to Seattle. Again, there are opportunities for Chicago to win that game, so I only dropped them down 1 spot. They lost 28-22. I don't know, again, because of the way that Storm Week works out, if this is an indication of Chicago kind of losing their luster and Seattle coming back. I think it's just Chicago preserving some of their players to not have to worry too much about the upcoming Storm Week. But we'll see how things turn around on that one. And then we have our final 2, New England, like I mentioned before, defeating Anthem Carolina 26-6. Not a very impressive game for New England, but New England didn't have Felatoy Penny. Unfortunately, Felatoy Penny, as I mentioned in the prior game, suffered a pretty bad injury, and it looks like he's out. We'll mention more about the replacement for Felatoy Penny in the next game because he makes his appearance when New England played against RFCLA. And then the one team that's looking really, really good so far out of all this, I think far and beyond, is the Utah Warriors, who just destroyed San Diego 31-18. Yeah, I mean, I feel maybe because of Storm Week that all these teams kind of were not like looking their greatest. That's why there's a little bit of movement going on, but man, Utah definitely was the team of the week so far. They are looking really, really good. And, you know, they might end up being the Western Conference representative at the end of the season. It might come down to maybe Utah and New England or Utah and Chicago. We'll see. But the Utah coming out on top is definitely a surprise to me. But they have been looking really, really good and very, very dangerous. Let's go into Phase 2. So Phase 2, 4 teams played Tuesday and Wednesday. Again, the turnaround for especially New England and Anthem and Seattle is literally like 4 days. So it's already starting to be a grind, and you can see it in the rosters as well. We'll start with the Anthem and Seattle game. Anthem, like I mentioned before, already suffering a lot of injuries. There's no Junior Nafa. who was last season's Major League Rugby Rookie of the Year. There's no Sam Gala, who of course was the 2023 MLR Rookie of the Year. He wasn't there, and neither was Eric Storty, who was the number 1 draft pick of the prior year in 2024 for Anthem. So Anthem is, they're already lacking some of the firepower of other teams, but they're far more lacking because of all the injuries. And so Seattle comes into town, and Seattle destroys them 60-19. 9 tries scored by Seattle. Now again, I'm not going to say that Seattle's back. Seattle will have opportunities to prove that they're back in the next couple of weeks during Storm Week. But I really feel this is just Anthem kind of limping along, unfortunately. A lot of people thought this was the game that will be Anthem's first win over Seattle. It turned out to be exactly the opposite. It was completely Seattle's game to dominate, and dominate they did. Like I said, 9 tries total, 5 in the first half, 4 in the second half. We also got to mention that Rickard Hadding scored a try, 47th of the career, second overall in Major League Rugby history, just behind the 61 from Dylan the Butcher Fawcett. Malachi Esdale also scored a try. He has been phenomenal so far, making the transition from 7s to 15. I do have to mention that there's a beautiful kick pass try to Jeremiah Seo. Yeah, it was all Seattle. Seattle has been very dominant in this game. Ronnie Ona also has been looking very good for Seattle in the last couple of games, so he's kind of turned it around a little bit as well. And then the other game on Tuesday, RCLA facing New England. As an RCLA fan, this was a heartbreaker of a game because RCLA at the half was up 14-3, ended up losing 23-21. RCLA, again, just not a second half team. A lot of these games that RCLA has been losing are after having a lead in the first half. New England definitely didn't have a full squad. RCLA kind of had a mixed bag as well. Not all their starters were starting. Some of them were coming in as reserves, like Reese McDonald was coming off the bench. And that should be mentioned as well. This was a very interesting game, as this was the first time that Reese McDonald, former New England Free Jack, was able to suit up in an RCLA jersey at New England. And then also on the flip side, New England's replacement for Felatoy Penny was Dan Hollinshead, who used to be RFCLA's fly half last season. Now, Dan Hollinshead struggled a lot with RFCLA. He was definitely not consistent. In this game, he was the difference maker. RCLA unfortunately made quite a few silly penalty errors that resulted in penalty kicks. Dan Hollinshead was a perfect 4 for 4 off of the tee. 3 penalty kicks, 1 conversion. And again, LA only lost by 2 points. And those 3 penalty kicks, that's 9 points right there. That made all the difference in the game. I do have to mention that RCLA's defense looked really, really great. Again, New England only scored 2 tries in this game, so it wasn't like LA didn't try. It's just there's some penalties. There was a yellow card, of course. LA's mall defense wasn't great, but it was a very winnable game for LA, and unfortunately just didn't have it. Very fortunate that Semi Kunatani, who was starting this game, he was able to get the last second try to get the bonus point to stay at least 1 point ahead of Seattle in the conference rankings. But a little disappointing for RCLA. Hopefully, again, they have a quick turnaround. They played on Tuesday. Now we got to play Saturday with our rival, San Diego. But again, San Diego's been having issues, so that's going to be an interesting game, which, of course, we'll talk about in our preview video. So, with that being said, let's talk about our SuperBru Pick'em Pool. And BT Woodrow, congratulations. He gets the golden cap, 8.75 points out of a possible 19.5. Interestingly enough, this is the first time we've actually had 2 wooden spoon losers. I don't know how that works out, because if you look at the points, Mr. Rugby also had the same amount of points as CrossFox, who is our leaderboard leader. So this is kind of a shock to have CrossFox with the wooden spoon, and GMV Rugby. So I have no clue how they work that out with the wooden spoon, because they have the exact same points, but they gave just 2 out of the 3 the wooden spoon. Number 2, who this second time he's come in second place, Theo God, 8.25. Tied for third is MSDRFC 83, who was one of our prior champions, Mike, and Villaferro, who is a longtime SuperBru player, as well as a longtime friend of the channel. They are tied with 7 points, and then we have 3 players tied for 5th. USA Rugby League and Union fan, which, that's my friend Coop, John Hawkins, and Lady Juliet. Good job, Lady Juliet. Rarely, no disrespect to you, but rarely are you ever in the top 5. It's great to see you there. They're tied at 5th with 6.5 points. Now, quite a bit of development in our leaderboard. Overall, CrossFox still sits in number 1, but because of that wooden spoon showing, Julie EGW is right there, 44.33, 1.2 points behind. Very, very close. It's going to be very interesting to see how next week's results turn out, we might have a new number one. And then a couple points behind them is Sarai. Never knew how to pronounce it. He goes up 2 points, so he or she is hanging in there. And then unfortunately, my good friend John from Rugby Morning drops down a spot. Actually, he ties with Sarai with 42.08, but for whatever reason, they dropped him down a point. And then Nathan drops down a spot to number 5 with 41.5. Our overall bottom 5 looks pretty much the same. Looks a little bit different. JZS, our reigning defending SuperBru champion, drops down into the bottom 5 with 33 points. Hopefully, you can improve on that, JZS. Leon drops down a spot to 25, 32.5 points. And then the bottom 3 are pretty much the same with Sunshine, GMV Rugby, and Melbourne Rocker. So, very interesting developments. Like I said, if you're a SuperBru pick'em, remember we do have extra games in this Storm week as well. So make sure you get all your picks in and change them if you need to. I mean, again, certain things that happen over the weekend, roster development, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to change results. And as been shown, at least with this week, anything can happen in these coming Storm weeks. Anybody could win. Will Anthem get their first win? Maybe. We'll see. We'll talk about that again in my preview video for this upcoming week of rugby action. As always, thank you very much for checking out my video, and I'll see you on the pitch.